Hello, everyone. My name is Eileen Donovan, and I'm the new Director of Learning and Engagement at the Lyman Allyn Art Museum. Welcome, everyone, for another excellent conversation about the exhibition, Memories and Inspiration, the Kerry and C. Betty Davis Collection of African American Art. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Amalia Amaki and collector Kerry Davis for their discussion about the artists featured in this exhibition. We would like to thank our partners at Public Art for Racial Justice Education, PARJ, for their contributions to this evening programs, and of course, my colleagues at the Lyman Allyn for their work in planning this evening. Memories and Inspiration, on view at the Lyman Allyn until August 22nd, is an eclectic gathering of pieces crossing different mediums, subjects, and styles by a group of artists of the African diaspora who, in terms of training, experience, and expression, are singularly diverse, but unified in their use of cultural and historical narratives. Their collection includes works by Radcliffe Bailey, Romero Beard, Beverly Buchanan, Elizabeth Catlett, and some of my favorites, Jacob Lawrence and Alma Thomas. We are thrilled to welcome back Kerry Davis. Kerry, a retired mailman, and his wife Betty, a former television news producer, formed this fantastic collection of art over 35 years, with the intention to preserve cultural memories and provide their community with a source of inspiration. Kerry and Betty kept in mind the importance of gathering and preserving a spectrum of approaches to the Black image in order to console the psyche and contribute to a more authentic articulation of the self. You can hear more from Kerry and Betty Davis by watching our exhibition opening, which we did in May, now on our website. This conversation, though, will be led by the wonderful Dr. Amalia Amaki. She is an artist, art historian, curator, and writer. She holds bachelor's degrees from Georgia State University and the University of New Mexico, as well as a master's and PhD in modern American art and culture from Emory University, where she received a foreign study fellowship to France. Dr. Amaki has taught at Spelman and Morehouse Colleges, the University of North Georgia, University of Delaware, and University of Alabama. She also taught photography as a visiting scholar at Saatchi in Florence, Italy. And her publications include A Century of African American Art, the Paul R. Jones Collection, Hale Woodruff, Nancy Elizabeth, Prophet, and the Academy, and books on Tuscaloosa and Tuskegee, Alabama. She's also contributed essays to several art books and exhibition catalogs, and has authored art-related articles and blogs. Her numerous solo shows include a retrospective at the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., and at Spelman College Museum of Fine Art. She received an NEA grant fellowship in photography and won art commissions from Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the 1996 Olympics, the High Museum of Art, and several other public agencies and public corporations. So with that, I am so thrilled to turn this conversation to Dr. Amaki and Kerry Davis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kerry, are you unmuted?
I am unmuted.
Okay, I just want you to be ready. I'm gonna try to do this. I think let's see. I think I started wrong. Let me start over and share my screen.
Now I'm glitching over here, but I think I'm back now.
Okay. Let's hit share and then I'm trying to remember the class I had a few minutes ago.
Go to your left and play from start. Go 2 more over.
Yeah. Oh, did I do it wrong?
You can just use your arrow keys and go back to whatever slide you want to start on.
Okay.
That still works.
Okay, there we go. There we go. This will be very informal. So Kerry, anytime you want to jump in, but I wanted to take this opportunity because it's it's so appropriate with a collection and an exhibition of this type to talk about how you should not come to presentations of African American art with too many presumptions. There's generally the idea that that they are that they are figurative works, that they have historical or personal significance, and they do not warrant the kind of digging or investigating or thinking uh, about those images, not only as individual images, but how they interrelate one to another in an exhibition of this type. So I was struck right away by these two images. Uh, both images, the two girls who we can assume are sisters because their features are so similar. And they do appear to be of different ages. We're making those assumptions. That's an assumption we can make. Uh, and the portrait of a little girl, and I call it a portrait of a little girl by Ernest Critchlow called Waiting. And it's because to me it's a very interesting dynamic that's going on here, that in addition to both of these images really reflecting the idea of the innocence of these young girls, they're both as much portraits of innocence as they are the subjects that are in them. But it's also striking to me that these two images are so radically different in the kinds of narratives that they sort of point us to, given that they were both done around the time of the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s. Um, the image on the left is not only an image of innocence, it follows the canon of historical portraiture in many respects. Uh, the Critchlow on the right causes us to look beyond the innocence of the young girl, but and to put that innocence in the context of uh, confinement, of danger, possibly. That is barbed wire. That's the field that is around her youthful and innocent face. He puts it in that context, so we're reminded that he is speaking to the the danger and the potential for danger uh, in the life of a young African American girl in this case, and that scenario is totally missing to a certain extent from the image that's on the left. They are equally appropriate for the time period in which they were created, but it's just very interesting that as makers of images about the African American and around the narrative of a young girl, that they would be so radically different, but at the same time have these points of intersection that cause them to, at some point, deal with that same idea. Because it's amazing how, in the face of danger, how children can still be children. They can still have that element of innocence about them. These two images together, for me, I also found striking because Edwin Harleston, who did the portrait on the left, often did create images that reminds us historically of the role of African Americans in war, and how that participation in those war efforts uh, aligned with a certain feeling of not so much politically, but in terms of defending what was right and what was best for America. So there was a source of a kind of energy or motivation that didn't just have to do with a revolution, which is clearly a part of the narrative in the Jacob Lawrence image from the Toussaint Louverture series, where Jacob Lawrence is dealing with leadership that is in a direct line with warriorship. Harston, even though he's addressing this Black seasoned soldier, it's still a portrait. So he's still trying to give us a sense of what this individual was like, and even what this individual possibly looked like. Jacob Lawrence is using a style that is non-specific in terms of defining who Louverture was, but at the same time, he gives us a sense of his authority. He gives us a sense of his strategic mind, we could say. And so at the same time, you have presentations of people, two male subjects, both concerned about liberation and liberty, and both fighting or representing people who have fought for the better, not only of the nation, but their culture. So in these very different kind of images, Lawrence, I don't think, really intended for his Toussaint Louverture figures to be seen as straight portraiture. He's telling a story. The scene of the subject is for the sake of the narrative. It's a little different with Harleston, where there is a narrative, but the narrative's in the background. He's more concerned about that personality, that person, that male who possibly championed a certain outcome that was a little bit different in terms of motivation than Louverture. And he tells us that he celebrates him even more by giving us an indication that he has won medals. He's done his job well. He's been a good leader. And so we get that kind of echoing in these two images, but it's just very striking to me just to put those together. And I also wanted to look at how portraiture is very varied from the perspective of many African American artists, where an existing photograph is superimposed on a background, I'll say, that has been heavily painted, heavily ornated, and it softens the image. It literally softens the image, and it's more in line with what Harleston was attempting, I believe, in portraying. Even though we don't know these people, we don't know who they are, but it gives them a sense of individualism. At the same time, they're sort of icons of people who are cornerstones, we could say, in the narrative of the African American experience. And in that, they sort of join together. And it's very difficult to talk about the Davis collection without talking about Norma Morgan. Norma Morgan, the Norma Morgan works in the collection are just, I think Kerry knows this, they're among my favorites. And her treatment of Tubman, and I show her, this is Norma Morgan on the right, but I like to show her with works by Charles White, because I will never forget, as a very young girl, having the opportunity to hear Charles White speak. And the question came up, who are your models? You know, the women that you create, the women that you put out there, they're always strong as shown as so strong and forceful. And he said, every woman I paint and every woman I draw is Harriet. And that just resonated with me, and I've carried that with me through these many years of my life. And what he was saying, because he did elaborate on it, is that his idea of Tubman, based on his knowledge of who she was, and not just what she did, but who she was as a woman, it really impressed him, and there was something. The inner Harriet, he said, was who motivated the outward physicalities that he put in his work. It was who she was inside. This strong, strategic, powerful, clever, all of these attributes he saw in her character. And so he transferred that into his portrayals of women. And so this idea of his very massive, strong, stern, even pensive Harriet, facing Morgan's highly spiritual, tactful, quiet Harriet, who not only, even though she puts her in this environment where she's almost consumed by the space that she's in, it's that very space that was the key to Harriet Tubman's effectiveness as someone who could lead people to freedom. She knew how to read nature. And so it was this marriage, I call it this marriage that she had with nature and the environment. Nature and the environment, that was her partner, and her understanding of it. And it was coupled by her very deep spiritual self. Harriet Tubman, if you wanted to say, prove to me that there's a higher power, one of the people you could use is Harriet Tubman. You could use her narrative, because she heard things that told her things that people did not tell her. And those things not only led her to freedom, but allowed her to go and bring other people to freedom. It allowed her to be a spy. It gave her that ability that knowledge that no one could explain, that she had, and she always had it at the precise moment that she needed it. Those elements of her character and her total submission to that spiritual guidance that she was adhering to. Those kind of things really make her narrative very powerful. And to me, no one captures it with the meticulousness and the care and precision of Norma Morgan. So that submissive Harriet against facing this very powerful, massive portrayal of Harriet, who, as Charles White said, all his women were Harriet, makes for a very interesting discussion. And I hope when people see some of these works in the exhibition, they'll think about some of these relationships. And I had to put her in here because her attitude just brings another element. I know very few African Americans who do not have that one woman in their family who is just a character. And you get the sense of that in this portrayal. So I just had to mention her. And then someone mentioned Romero Beard being a favorite. being a favorite. So it's very striking to me also how Romero Beard can personify sound. I think the way that he portrays musicians, they go beyond just being these figurative references to people who make sound. They are the sound in his images, and very few people I think match him in doing that. And I just wanted to place that in the company of a piece where it's a lot more literal treatment of a music maker, uh, someone blowing a horn, sitting on a can. You know, um, that's a one man jam session, so to speak. Uh, and having these kind of back and forth, it's the life of a musician. Creative people, whether it's music or the visual arts or dance or writing, there's an aspect to that that compels you to be alone. Being alone is a part of that process and that life uh, of any creative, of most creative beings. So I thought that was very interesting. And then I love the fact that uh, Freddie Styles, whose work is on the right, and Alma Thomas, whose work is on the left, here are two people who are so motivated in what they create by things in nature, and their work just it's similar in some ways, but overall it's so radically different. But that passion is so similar, that thing that causes them to do what they do. And it's also the multi layers of the way in which those images can be approached. Uh, Freddie Styles' surfaces are just so, if you really look at them, they're so busy. They're so busy. You get a sense of all of the energy that went into building up those images, those hundreds of, in some cases, I'm sure it's thousands of strokes. Uh, you get that in Alma Thomas's work, in some of her work, but in others you get these very loose but active broad areas of color, and then she layers that with these more energetic, um, almost like the wind blowing across her paintings, and those kinds of things I find just very interesting in their works. And I do see Freddie's work. I love looking at his work and then looking at Romero Beard. And that's because even though he's motivated by things in nature, because of the sense of active work on the surface that you get when you look, you go, oh my God, how many times did he touch that to make those? And you get a sense of that movement that's very similar to musicians at play. And so I love putting those two together, but not to be remiss is the same sensation can be experienced when you look at uh, relate Alma Thomas's work to the work of Romero Beard. And her work is very lyrical, very what I call musically poetic. Uh, and so there are all these connections that you can make. And I just wanted to not, can't say much about Mo Brooker, but I wanted to say Mo Brooker could be included in this discussion. I think where he stands out in ways that relates him to the others, but a little differently, is his bold use of color and his color interaction. So you get a greater sense of that energy and movement, in part because of his color relationships and not just the brushwork. And of course, I love making those kinds of associations between these abstract painters. And I wanted to spend time on the abstract works, in some abstract works in the Davis collection, because uh, abstraction is one of those approaches that always end up causing some, I don't want to say heated discussions, but they're certainly lively. Uh, so many observers of African American works, people come to it expecting to see figure after figure after figure. But the wonderful contribution of some of the abstractionists cannot be overlooked. And I'm very proud of the Davises that they did not overlook these works, these kinds of works. And the work of someone like, Sam Gilliam, who, oh my God, the idea that a male painter would apply pigment to a raw surface and then fold it and allow the folding process to do what a paintbrush typically does. It's just very interesting, and the surfaces that it creates. And I know occasionally he will go back in those surfaces sometimes and apply paint not only with a brush but sometimes with a palette knife. That he will do those things uh, when he is so inclined to do so. But the idea that he would use raw fabric, often his fabrics are unstretched when he's applying his pigment. And so it's a very process oriented creativity that he often engages in. But I also find him to be one of the most skillful colorists when it comes to his manipulation of these canvas surfaces. I'm gonna keep moving because I don't want to. How am I doing for time? Uh-oh, did we freeze
You're
up?
wonderful.
Okay, we're
Good
okay.
for time.
Why are we freezing up? Let's see what's happening here.
If anyone wishes to submit questions, you can put them in the chat box and we'll explore questions in the last couple of moments of the program.
Okay. And here's my girl Norma again on the right. But this is oh, his name will come to me. Hardwick. Uh, and I like to I wanted to discuss them together because they both have this had this particular uh, love for the landscape. They liked depicting the landscape in its what I would call its natural state. Uh, Hardrick would paint his beloved Indianapolis. He loved his home, Indianapolis. He would paint it in all the seasons and would not take away from any of the definitive elements that defined not only the season but the setting. Uh, Norma Morgan, in her own way, did something that she did pretty much the same thing. It's what you see in the image is essentially a reflection of what she saw. And so that love for the landscape and that love for the landscape that was for her in many years home. Uh, Fascinating, different kinds of images that come out of the same love affair for the landscape. Uh, Norma Morgan loved the threatening, mammoth, overpowering, uh, even dangerous kinds of elements in natural terrains, because that's nature. That's nature. Nature for her was power. The water was power. The mammoth trees were power. These were reflections of the power of nature. And she loved it. And she captured it and put it in that context. So her narrative subject very often was nature. Hardrick's narrative subjects most of the time were nature. And he used this very impressionistic kind of style of painting to convey that. But I read one statement Hardrick made, and he was very excited about a very small painting he had done, and he said, I had to paint it quickly because there was I think it was the first time he experienced. Now I don't know if it's called. I can't remember. I need Jim Cantori here. I can't remember if it was snow, lightning, or if it's called lightning snow. Which way is it? Anyway, it was the first time he experienced a snowfall where there was thunder and lightning. And he did a little tiny painting to capture it. And he was so excited that he was able to capture the sense of that, that sudden flash of light that came through the what he called that blanket snow cloud that was a part of the scene, the sky that he was painting at the time. And I know it's not this painting, but this painting makes me think of his account of how unusual that weather phenomenon is, and how he was so thrilled that he got to experience it. And then I put this here for Kerry because Jacob Lawrence's Builders, a wonderful series for many collectors that I know personally. It's their favorite. It's their favorite series. But it's also being shown here with a painting by Claude Clark. And it's very interesting because what's prominent in both is tools, but it's how the tools are functioning in the two images that makes them very, very different, and in some ways poles apart. The Jacob Lawrence is laborers, and I don't want to talk too much about it because I hope Kerry will. The Claude Clark is someone being freed from shackles, and so it's kind of a yin and yang of how, you know, tools can be used to build, and tools can be used to destroy, and it's not so much destruction, it's a positive destruction in the Claude Clark, but it's clearly it's freeing. You know, it's a different function of the tool, and it's I can remember, I'm always reminded of this. There's a Western. I love Westerns, and there's this Western, and throughout the Western, there's the star is in handcuffs, and a good 2/3 of the film, he's trying to figure out how to break that shackle, you know, just how to become free, because he can be more effective in keeping some people alive if his hands are free. And so it's a very powerful, I think, juxtaposition to have these two images side by side. And then I like the attitudes in these. That's the only reason I put these here. The draftsmanship is just excellent in the drawing. I think that's Yeshua. Is that the correct pronunciation, Kerry? Yeshua. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But I love the angle, and because the angle just accentuates the attitude of the male figure in that image, and the woman on the left is just, to me, she's such a character, and that pose, and it's interesting how if you look at how they're angling their head slightly, she's not as exaggerated as he is, but the pose is not terribly different, but it's the interior, and then the kind of nondescript feel that the figure is in makes that an interesting juxtaposition for me. So that I didn't think that was the end, but it might be. How am I doing for time? I want to get Kerry in on this discussion.
Have another minute or two, but we
Okay.
have received a couple of questions in the
great.
chat.
Okay.
If you want to turn to any of the questions, or if Kerry has anything.
Okay. I need to get to questions. Okay.
Mhm.
Can you see them? I can't see. Do I need to stop the slideshow in order to see them? I thought they looked at the bottom.
Perhaps if you exit out of the full screen,
Okay.
but I can also read some out to you.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So we have a question for Kerry. Did you know that cultural preservation was one of your main purposes of collecting in the beginning? Or what were some of your motivations early on?
Did I know that? I don't know if I knew that, but I'm not surprised whatsoever. That makes sense to me. What were some of my motivations early on, you say? To be honest, I started collecting was basically to decorate my home. I had a small home in suburb of Atlanta, and sort of man cave, so to speak. But I wanted to put something on the wall, but not just a quote unquote picture, but something that was meaningful. And I did want it to reflect my ethnicity and my history, my story. And, so that's what started, when I start first, and I didn't start collecting art. I was buying things that appealed to me. Collecting is a bit different. You spend more time researching, and there's some study involved in collecting. There's a difference between, I guess, just buying art and collecting art.
If I might say, Kerry, I don't agree. I remember when the was it the Macintosh Gallery? Or was it Stanley Hudson or both?
Well,
when they were on your route, when they were on he was their mailman, so to speak. And Kerry would go in those galleries and look at art, and usually he would, even though I think you would pay over time, but you often make purchases.
Well, I mean, that's true, Amalia. But there were some things I bought early on, not out of galleries, from different places, that they eventually became gifts, Christmas gifts, or whatever gifts. They they didn't meet the mark. So, and I think that's okay when you're starting out, because you have to educate your eye as well, as you go along. But I've been fortunate enough, because I've been around a lot of artists, a lot of friends of mine are artists. I've been able to hang in their studios. And like you said, on a lot of my mail routes, I was in a business district or an arts district, where, I talked to gallery owners, and, being a postman, you really are a part of the community, a part of the family. And they would share with me, or articulate just what I was looking at, and that type of thing. So yeah, it did. It helped me tremendously.
And that was education.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, to get out and to get to the different museums, or go up to Clark Atlanta University, and to see the works, and get a chance to, talk to the curators up there, and read the stories. And again, there are artists up there. There was, artists almost everywhere I've been around. I just noticed them, and that was my education.
expand upon one of the questions in the chat, but could the two of you speak a little bit about some of the conversations that might have taken place that are either similar or different when this artwork is presented in your home, Kerry, what happens there, versus what happens maybe when it's placed in a gallery or in a museum or a bigger institution? I'm sure you both have perspectives from each direction.
Well, some of the conversations had in the home, which is, really great because you're free to talk any way you want to, and I know when I used to go to galleries or museums, for some, there was an intimidation there. You didn't want to seem so ignorant or let anybody know you don't understand, or it was like you were supposed to understand what was going on as you look at it. But in the home, people can be free, and especially if you know me or been around me, if you can't talk to me, you can't talk to anybody, because we can bring it down where the rubber hit the road here. And I would always say, your opinion about a piece of art is pretty much valid as anybody's, because the work itself speaks to your experiences. I may look at an image and see something, come away with something different than what you see, but your experiences speaks to those things. So conversations in the home, for one, they're very honest and they're open. And then we can share with each other of what this means to me, or what I see in this, or what attracts me to this. And you tell me, maybe we can meet, and maybe we may never meet, but it's okay. You're free to discuss, and not be intimidated by anything. Ms. Amala.
Okay. Okay. As for museums and galleries, I think that's where we can serve a different purpose and bring these other possibilities to the forefront, if for only the sake of lively conversation. And hopefully, not only is something picked up, it's something learned, but that it inspires people to want to know more. For example, I'm always amazed when, for example, the comment I made about Charles White. I've had a number of even historians come to me and say, "I didn't know he said that," and I said, "Yes, he did." And they'll say, "Well, that makes sense. That's why there is a similar way in which he portrays all of his women, all of his female subjects." And of course, a good part of that body of work, if you really look at it, he'll allude to it. Several pieces are referred to as Moses and Harriet and things like that. So, but I do think we can even be useful to even the collectors. Sometimes when collections or parts of a collection are on view, how that curator hangs that show and presents that work, and the kinds of comments that are placed around it. Sometimes collectors see things that they have been doing that they were not consciously aware of, that they were doing, and so it's a positive, and it's a learning experience for both of us. It's nice. I love hearing the collector's stories. How some things were acquired, why certain things appeal to them, and usually it's a good exchange. It's a very good place for that, and it's a very good place for that exchange to happen. They also, I think, benefit collectors from seeing that work out of the home and seeing it in a different environment, and just sometimes having it in a different space will cause them to see things that they had not seen before in work that in pieces that they've lived with for 10 and 15 years at home. So I think it's in addition to being there for the sake of possibly educating the public, I think we can all learn from having works from collections like the Davis collection on view in a public space.
And that tailors wonderfully to one of the other questions, as you said, that it has a variety and breadth within the works presented. When Kerry, you were collecting, and Dr. Amaki for other works that you've seen, were you purposefully acquiring some of that variety? Was there a point where you said, I've had a lot of figures, I've had a lot of portraits, now I'm working on the colorists, now I'm working on this area? Was that intentional, or maybe it just grew?
Intentional, but you're absolutely right. There was a period where I was collecting works on paper. And, and it's just one day I'm walking through and, there's framing involved and glass involved. And I thought I need to diversify the medium. And I did. I just, I said, so I started to buy works on canvas, works on board, just a different medium. And I found that conservation-wise, they were a little easier to take care of. A part of being a collector, you are a caretaker because you are preserving these for another generation and another generation, down the way. So yeah, and the same thing once, I went far, started to look at sculpture, and photography as well. So yeah, but that's an evolution. That was something that I just kind of evolved to, but that was a decision I made to do, And then, like some artists, like I had a Elizabeth Catlett some prints, but I so wanted an Elizabeth Catlett sculpture, and which is a stretch, but it happened, it happened. So yeah, to answer your question.
Both of which you can see at the museum in the exhibit. For Dr. Amaki, when you were learning more about the Davis collection, was there anything about what he acquired that surprised you, knowing that you've studied so many different areas?
Not really surprised. I was, if the closest I came to a surprise was finding the Norma Morgans, because I had not, I don't know of very many people who were collecting her work prior to, I would say, the last 10 years. It was 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen a lot of her work in collections. And she was, I think Kerry and I have talked about this a gazillion times because I just love her. And people she was not being heavily collected. There was a time period when she was very productive and when she was alive, and then it sort of waned. And I think it waned, and this is just my opinion, but I think it waned in the face of a little bit more acceptance of abstraction and more contemporary looking landscapes. Norma Morgan's technique is almost a classical approach to image making in many respects. Hand painted engravings. But I think there is a revival of serious interest in not only her skill, but just the very look and feel and narrative in her imagery. And I'm just thrilled to see it. Yeah, I think I told him that when he said he had Norma Morgan, I said, "You're kidding." But I think if there was a surprise, it was that. But it was a good surprise. It wasn't um, anything like that. And I have to say, it's not unusual for uh, the African American collections that I have been exposed to. It's pretty typical that there's a diversity of media periods, that sort of thing, because I think whether it's conscious or subconscious, I think there is a desire to have a kind of survey of what African Americans have created. And I think that's not unusual. At least with the majority of the collectors that I've had interaction with.
Well, Norma Morgan was a very easy one for me. She was a good friend of mine, and she was she was getting up in age when I met her, probably back in the late 90s, I guess. And but I've always loved her work, but I really loved her. She was very enchanting, but she was so very talented. Her work was just, she could depict a blade of grass. And I remember a conversation I had with Emma Amos, and Emma lived from Atlanta but moved to New York. And I said, "Do you know Norma Morgan?" And her eyes lit up and she said, "Rembrandt." And yeah, and I understand why, because Rembrandt had an influence on Norma Morgan's work. But I would love to sit down and with a lot of seniors and a lot of the senior artists where they tell me stories, just wonderful stories. Hers was very different. A lot of the artists would tell stories about the time, and we know how difficult it was for them in coming up, and with all the social issues and all of that type of thing. But Norma Morgan did not focus on that, none whatsoever. It's always something enchanting, like being in a forest and seeing these little people come out of the trees and the elves, and she take you to a different place, a very lovely, delightful lady. And of course, we collected a lot of her work. Well, we have a good bit of her work that I just simply love because I could see her in her work. And but I always thought that someday, this work is really fantastic. Someday, my father used to say, cream will rise to the top. And she's getting more attention now. I'm seeing exhibition comes up in her work, and I see her work more and more now. So yeah, it's just fortunate, and it was a great loss, but she was a joy, and on this journey, like I met Jacob Lawrence, or had the opportunity to have conversations, and Beard and Catlett, and these people are passed along now. So when I walk through the house or I look at the collection, it's much more than just looking at some of their artwork. I see my friends, and I think about the times we had, or the things I learned from them. And I was very naive, and they never made me feel less than human for asking some very, very basic question. But they embraced me, and now Betty and I, we have an opportunity to share it with the world.
And what's great about all of them, Beard probably being the one exception, they would have been that way with you because they all were teachers. And so they had that understanding and just that teaching demeanor. That Jacob Lawrence once made the comment that he thought he was a good a good painter. Oh no, he said he used the word decent. Now he knew he was better than decent, but he made the comment once that he felt he was a decent painter because he was a teacher. And he said when he taught his classes, he listened to his own voice. I thought that was very powerful. But they were all pretty sweet, easygoing.
Yeah.
Norma was incredible. I never met her personally, but even Camille Billups softened when she would talk about Norma. She'd become a softer person, and that says a lot about who she was. Mhm.
And I think one of the most important takeaways of even just the title of the exhibition is that it's memories and inspiration, preserving the memories of these artists while they're alive, but also continuing to preserve as you're collecting living contemporary artists as well. So we've approached the end of our program time. So I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us this evening. As a reminder, Memories and Inspiration is on view at the Lyman Allyn until August 22nd, but then it is traveling. So about a month later, it'll wind up in Indiana. So excited that this show is on, I think, a 3-year tour schedule. So if you don't get to see it with us, I encourage you to see it elsewhere. The Lyman Allyn is free all summer long. So as you're coming by, please visit us. Know that you can do it at any moment. On July 24th, the Davises are visiting us. So we are hosting a community ice cream social celebration to celebrate their visit, to celebrate the exhibit. We'll have art making, activities, and learning and more inspired by the exhibition. So you can check out our website for information on the Ice Cream Social on July 24th. And then we have a couple other programs that I just encourage everyone to look at our website for. This Sunday, we'll have contemporary artist Ana Flores exploring the first lecture for her Forest Dialogue series, Connecting Contemporary Art and the Environment. And then yoga in the gardens the following week. So lots of things to do, and that's just in the month of July. So thank you all for joining us and have a lovely evening.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.